So our first question comes from Chaitanya, Dr. Rajamani, who's also one of our graduate students, who says, how might our communities transform if we viewed personal security as a collective responsibility rather than an individual burden based on Jain teachings? Is that how you're even interpreting it? Does that question make sense?
Yes, I think so. And if you take human security framing, that is about multi-level approaches. And this part I actually like a lot, that it says it's not about one or the other. Yes, in a way, it is a personal duty, but it is also about the importance of communities, that people together, they can form meaningful associations for addressing issues that will then benefit the individual. So one of the other subtopics actually about of the 7 types of human security is community security, meaning the importance of preserving the stability and the flourishing of communities, because people do not exist in isolation, they exist in some form of communities. So I think that interconnectedness between the community and the individual, that is very important. And there, I hope that your Compassion and Action initiative, it might inspire some of these things in terms that it can highlight how do people already get together in terms of voluntary associations, or in terms of doing good things in the world together, that are bridging these needs for the individual security and the more collective action. And the example I gave on the road safety, I don't know if that was still in what I spoke about. It's about the renouncer, who obviously has like a more inner focused approach to life, but how that can in personal security discussions still be connected to the lay people's more maybe social concern for their community, and how that is not in opposition, just as like feeding the renouncer and the renouncer. There are levels of interaction there, that you're not supposed to cook for that person directly, but there are still interactions going on that are very important for both sides. So yes, I think that's a great point, that we have to think from both directions. From the inner personal, it's not nothing wrong with that. It's very important to have that individual focused aspect, I think, in Jain teachings. But the community aspects, they are also important, and they are already there. They are already happening. And I think, yeah, there will probably be many great examples of what Jain communities are doing for others to be more secure from coming out from your initiative.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because then also tomorrow we'll have some wonderful leaders from the Jain community who have various nonprofits that are engaged in various forms of work that really focus on some of the biggest forms of human insecurity with regard to food and education and healthcare. So we'll be hearing from all those thought leaders tomorrow, some of whom I know personally now, Melanie. So yeah, thanks. That really sets us up well for that panel tomorrow. We also have a great question from Gilbert Valentine, which says, with the key issue of ahimsa, does the Jain philosophy have any emphasis on solutions to prevent warfare and promote peace? For example, does it have advice and guidance on effective diplomacy? So I guess this points back to the other point you brought up about warfare and whatnot, and militarization.
Yeah, I think the Jain position on warfare is very interesting, because there are Jains serving in the military, which is often pointed out as attention to that commitment to ahimsa. But I think the Jain tradition has thought in detail about that duty to protect also, and how the real life issues, the difficulty of choosing one value over the other, and how governance of states that requires some form of preparedness to protect, how that can go along with a commitment to ahimsa. So advisors, Jain advisors to worldly rulers, they would try to bring in that highest value of nonviolence, so only defensive wars, a cultivation of proper attitude. And I think these things, just as they were in history, they are still applicable now. Much of what I'm doing is thinking about translation processes between different communication systems. So often religious or philosophical language is thought as very different from the language of diplomacy. But I think that terms like ahimsa, they can actually speak with a lot of value to diplomatic discussions, and that it should not be accepted, especially in times when there is so much talking about the need for the post-secular framing of what is going on in the world. It should not be excluded to speak about all these Jain values of compassion. all these terms that we have discussed as part of this panel, they can find a way into diplomatic documents. It's just a matter of translation processes.
Yeah, and I know that some of your work, in particular, I just saw you published a chapter in the new Anikantavada volume, has focused on various applications of Anikantavada in these kind of difficult spaces, or challenging spaces. And so that might be one of the tools as well that you would probably also recommend, I imagine, for having these kind of discussions of diplomacy, just based on other work that I know that you've done. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, so
Wonderful.
there are many areas that Jains can speak of, I think, confidently, because there's this rich tradition. So I've been thinking about in education spaces, for example, not just as content, but also to provide for frameworks. And it's about thinking how can the language be framed in ways that it is understandable for both sides. Much of this is going on, so I think it's great work done at Arihanta Institute also in these directions of really showing the applicability of traditional philosophical contexts to modern discussions.
Yeah, it's great to engage these ideas with the contemporary issues of our time. And you and all the other presenters have done that so wonderfully in the conference. And I really do thank you for your time. I realize we're running up against time. I didn't know if Alba, you were going to pose a question, or did you have a question that you typed in the chat?
Well, it's a short comment. I can just say directly. So yeah, Melanie, but it was a very thoughtful presentation. But when I first heard you talking about security, so I appreciate the other perspectives that you gave us. And my concern, I guess, is more about I'll just is because there's this narrative and this discourse very strong. I don't know if Europe is so strong, but in the United States is very strong about security, and how this is being used. I don't think is at all in the sense that that we might want it to be used, right? Security in the discourse these days, especially by politicians and in social media, is really about controlling, manipulating. So yeah, I'm glad to know about others' interpretations of security, and I was wondering if you just can say something about that, or maybe it's not so strong in Europe. So
yeah. Thank you very much. This is actually the context in a way that I was trying to respond to with my presentation, because to rethink security as compassion in action, because exactly compassion is what is taken out of much of the current political security discussions. It's about getting rid of people who might not have the perfect visa status. It's really incompassionate. It's devaluing compassion as part of human life. And I think that many traditions can say that you cannot separate security from compassion, because security is really part of a bigger frame of human flourishing. And if the individual does not count in there, and a good life, then that whole framework of security, it's just not life-giving, it's destructive. So it's challenging exactly what you were saying. Thank you so much for that.
I think it's completely the other side in a sense, because here, as I'm saying, the discourse on security is really tied to the military, to fear, to imposing all these things that the Jain tradition is trying to, they don't want. So here is really about yeah, military and all the opposite. So yeah, thank you for flipping that.
Thank you.
You've flipped the discourse. Yeah. Thank you for engaging this very important issue, and Alba for pointing out that important nuance, because it is the other discourse that's taking place in a lot of parts of the world right now. So thank you, Professor Melanie Barbato, for joining us from Fiji so early in the morning. And I thank all of our presenters for this first day of the Compassion in Action Conference, the third annual Engaged Jain Studies Conference. Tomorrow, we're going to hear from a number of other wonderful leaders, thought leaders, members of the community, both young and old, all different age groups, about practicing compassion in action in the world. I didn't know if our CEO and President Parveen Jain wanted to say any last words, but if Parveen Jain, did you want to say anything?
Jai Jinendra, thank you very much, everybody, for great presentations today. It was spellbinding. Really could not leave the screen or computer, because every conversation, every presentation was just great. So we are looking forward to another great day tomorrow.
Outstanding. Yes, thank you so much for those final words. Thank you to all of our presenters and our audience members for your close attention and participation and all the great questions that came through. We start at the same time tomorrow, 9 a.m. Pacific, and we go until 1 p.m. Pacific. So it'll be another 4 hours tomorrow of wonderful members of the community, thought leaders in the community. We look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Have a wonderful rest of your Saturday or Sunday, wherever
Jai
you
Jinesh.
Jai Jinendra.